Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the session, Patrick Tucker.
Hello, good afternoon. Good to see you. Thanks for sticking around. This is a very fun session, a very important session on the future of multi-domain operations. Real quick show of hands. Who here knows what multi-domain operations are? Raise your hand if that's a familiar concept. Okay. Hopefully everyone in uniform is raising their hand. I should hope. And if you're not, it's okay. For those of you that don't have never heard the term before, for those of you watching on the screen that have never heard it, we're talking about the different domains. Land is a domain, sea is a domain, air is a domain, space is a domain, and multi-domain operations is the process of linking them all together through operations, primarily through intelligence, through data. It's very hard to do. The United States right now is involved in like a 5 to 10 year project called Joint All-Domain Command and Control, basically linking everything in the air, all the sensors, all the platforms, all the drones, all the boats, all the soldiers together in a single data layer to accelerate operations. And it's very hard to do even for one country, much less the entire NATO alliance. But if you can do it, you have a distinct advantage even over a great state competitor. You're going to outflank them basically at every turn. So it's a challenge worth undertaking. We're going to hear more about it in just a second, because before our panel shows up, I would like to welcome this first presentation from Phil Breedlove, Alexander Lanoszka, and Marcin Zaborowski to give a GLOBSEC presentation on their report, Connect to Succeed, Multi-Domain Operations, Readiness on the Eastern Flank. Coming up, guys.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this extremely short presentation of our report. We will talk about multi-domain operations in great length in a few minutes. But before that, I wanted to introduce our report, the report of GLOBSEC, Future Security and Defense Council, which is chaired by General Ben Hodges. He's kindly here with us. For the last few months, we've been working on the report on how multi-domain operations can apply to us here at the eastern flank of NATO. So our lead writer on this project has been Alexander Lanoszka, the professor from the Waterloo University, and our chief expert and advisor of that has been General Phil Breedlove. Needs no introduction, perhaps just mentioning that Phil Breedlove is a 4-star Air Force general, very familiar with the issues of multi-domain operations. So without much more ado, let me just pass the floor immediately to Alexander for your 3 minutes.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to produce this report and to participate in this very launch here in Prague. So last year, NATO embraced multi-domain operations as part of its military strategy. Still, our knowledge of how NATO members think about MDO has largely been confined to those members in Western Europe and North America. This is ironic because the threat assessments that guided MDO thinking in its early days about a decade ago had in mind scenarios involving Russia using standoff military capabilities to divide allies in peacetime and to isolate them in wartime in the Baltic region. So what we wanted to do in this report is to see whether that threat assessment has held up and to determine to what extent NATO members along the eastern flank are thinking about MDO, or for that matter, connectivity. So one finding is that despite all the tactical difficulties that have beset Russia's military performance in Ukraine so far, its missile and electronic warfare capabilities still have created significant challenges for the Ukrainian armed forces. As such, Russia still remains very much a multi-domain threat to NATO. However, there is wide variation in how Eastern Flank members of NATO are thinking about MDO. Some really do, as in the case of Poland, with regards to air defense and air power more generally, yet the norm in the region is really that of silence. There's very little explicit MDO thinking. The good news is that, at least when you read official and public government documents or defense documents, national defense establishments across the region are indeed thinking more and more in terms of connectivity, data fusion, and the like in view of those advances in information and telecommunications technology. Some of this awareness predates 2022, to be sure, but Ukraine's own military performance in the last 2 years, whether in Ukraine or even in Kursk, have really impressed upon many observers the value of greater connectivity and greater kill chain effectiveness. So the report elaborates on these points in full and offers policy recommendations that you can read yourself. Please get in touch with me if you'd like to get a copy, and I'll be very flattered, of course, if you read it. It's been a pleasure, and I indeed want to thank Marcin and General Breedlove for providing excellent institutional support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. Let me turn immediately to General Breedlove just to hear from you about the context of the MDO.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Ben, I want to thank you for commissioning this work. I think it's been great work. And as the author, the pen of the work, you've done a magnificent job, and it was my pleasure to be a small part as an advisor to the work. It's all worth reading. I would definitely, for the senior military, take a look at the policy recommendations that are in here. There will be some practical application, I think, to you and all of your nations. So I commend the whole report to you, but for sure the policy recommendations. My two remarks are very practical, so this is not rocket science. And that is my first remark. There is this feeling out there, especially among some of the smaller nations, that MDO is this mystical thing that they'll never be able to attain or to join to. And I would tell you it's anything but that. While I don't want to downplay what MDO is, I think it is evolutionary from where we are today, not revolutionary. We, in our country, were forced to do jointness because we made a mess of some operations when we tried to work together with land, air, and sea at the same time. And so we, I think, started in our country MDO when we were forced to become joint. And now what we're taking is that jointness that so many of our nations have embraced, and we're growing it to bring aboard the electronic spectrum, space, and the other things that we do now, which are new, but the way we will bring them together is very much the way we have done in the discipline of jointness to this point. So for all nations, I encourage you that this is attainable. This is something that you can join and be a part of and grow your capabilities in your nation. I'm going to make some people mad in here because the operation in Kursk doesn't maybe have the exquisite plugins of space and other things, but I would tell you the way that the Ukrainians are using EW, drones, artillery, and other opportunities in Kursk right now is an MDO operation, okay? So I think it is the future of our fighting force that we will evolve into these exquisite capabilities that we will bring into MDO, but you should not be afraid of that. This is something we can attain as a team. Now, I said that's all good, but there are some requirements to get into MDO. The idea that your kit, your communications, your ability to command and control has to be able to plug into NATO standards and NATO systems capability. This is connectivity and compatibility on steroids, if you know that term, okay? To be a part of MDO, you have to make those investments that allow you to connect you to the MDO framework. And that is the entry procedure. I'm going to quit in about 10 seconds here. I remember during my time as an F-16 fighter pilot, when we first initiated using Link 16 to connect people. That was a long time ago, okay? And there was this great angst that I don't have Link 16, so I don't get to get the data that all the other NATO aircraft are getting, and so forth. And then it extended itself to ground forces and to naval forces. But this is a little bit like that. We will have to ask nations who truly want to be a part of MDO to invest in those accelerated capabilities that can communicate and are compatible with the systems that will be a part of MDO. So I'm going to close with one more encouragement. This, I believe, is the future of warfighting. We want everybody on the team. We do not want to exclude people from this team. And I think that this report starts a lot of the conversation and the understanding of nations that may not have thought they were going to play, and encourage them that, yes, you too can be a part of MDO in the future.
Thank you. So as it was mentioned here, the report is ready, is available for you to pick up a copy. So please look especially at the recommendations. As General and Professor said, you know, the whole proposition of MDO should not be intimidating for you, really. The CORSC operation, in many respects, is an MDO multi-domain operation. And that's clearly the future here for us. Thank you very much, and thank you, the two gentlemen in particular.
Panelists Dr. Isabel Xavier, General Chris Badia, Jacinta Carroll, and Dennis George. Come join me on stage, please. Thank you. Okay. All right, we'll take a moment. Yes, so thank you for framing that, Phil. I think that's a perfect example of where and why MDO is so very important, why it's not a thing that's 1,000 feet tall, why it's attainable, but also why it's sort of hard. And the difficulty of that sort of, for NATO, falls to you a little bit, General Chris Badia. As a NATO observer, when you look particularly right now at Ukraine, you see how they're cobbling together MDO operations sort of on the fly. You see some gaps, but you also see some incredible emerging capabilities. Taking that, how has that Ukraine example or story changed or refined your view of multi-domain operations for NATO?
I would say you have to take a different approach to that. Hello, everyone. Because NATO overall, with its approach, how it would take on a conflict or a war, always developed. And then the Ukraine war came, and now we see a lot of similarities. And that's what we just heard. There you can see a lot of multi-domain operations aspects to that. But let me still come back to a more strategic view from a NATO point of view, and how do we observe that and how do we see that? Mm-hmm. The question we have to ask all ourselves is, how do I maintain the advantage? And this is what we just heard. Overall, the alliance is tasked, whatever it is, the threat that might be out there, how would we manage and at the end of the day win whatever conflict we have? And coming back, this is where NATO came into, and we heard that jointness was throughout, number one. However, and still ask yourself out there, everybody is more confident air, land, and sea. there are two new domains out there, which is cyber and space, which I come to, which we see, of course, in Ukraine war as well, how that does. So we have 5 new domains. And the question is, how do you really maintain the advantage and how do you connect? And this is through multi-domain operations, but multi-domain operations has 2 aspects to that. Because if you look back, and you saw it just during the Washington summit, it's not only that we have to face an Article 5 war, it's even more, we have to get, as a society, we have to get much more resilient. And this is where MDO comes in at the same time. Because MDO means orchestrate your 5 domains and synchronize with all the civil domains you have out there in order to have a much better understanding, situational awareness, with this information dominance, and then you have the decision dominance, and you can escalate. There you see, there is a strategy behind it, how we do it. Now coming back, has it changed? It has not changed to a great deal how NATO was thinking and developing. It was a reassurance, if you will, to see how that's being done and how you can see even, and you said that, to smaller nations where you have certain aspects within those 5 domains, how you connect it, but still you have to go with the civil domains at the same time. Take interior measures, border police, all the data you have, you need in order to get there. So this is the strategy we are going forward, and from a NATO perspective, this is what we pursue amongst the 32 nations, but at the same time, of course, we look a lot towards the Ukraine war in order to see what lessons identified and learned we have.
Okay. I want to stick with you for a second, because when I talk to folks in industry across government about the future, the key of multi-domain operations, one of the things that they bring up is that it's a really great time to actually talk about this capability. In some ways, rideshare programs like Uber are kind of doing multi-domain operations, because you take out your phone, you connect to a satellite, and then you can connect to a scooter. In certain parts of the world, you can connect to a boat, or you can connect to a car. And the reason they can do that is because they have central fusion of data, central fusion of sensed data put in one place through machine learning very simply, and then distributed to where it needs to go. So very quickly, General, how does artificial intelligence play a role in the future of MDO?
It's the same. Let me put it this way. If you want to go autonomous all the way, you can do that, but at the same time, you have to, in the domains we are working in, of course, you have to be secure at the same time, and you have to ensure that it works throughout whatever you meet out there. So the challenges are a bit different when you compare to what the civil world faces as threat versus what we face as a threat as we go forward with that. So, but on the question you just raised there, how we take. Did I understand it correctly? What advantages we're taking from there, or?
Yeah. Well, how does artificial intelligence and machine learning create a new opportunity from there?
You have to, it's pretty easy to say. We are going away from a platform-centric or network-centric warfare. We're going into a data-centric warfare. So you have these big data lakes. And the only advantage you have is through artificial intelligence, that you really grasp everything. And then it's what I said, information dominance and then decision dominance. How you prepare all those data in order to come up with the right decisions. This is the real advantage it gives you. And let me put that also one important comment on that one. MDO only will work if you go into digital transformation, you have a digital backbone, and then be interconnected. If you don't have that, then MDO won't work. Yeah. And that comes back to AI.
Yeah, I think that's great. So quick reminder to our audience, we do want to hear from you. We do want your participation. Use your Slido app. Send us some questions. We want to field them. We also have someone in the room with a microphone in case you don't like Slido for some reason. At some point, raise your hand and we'll come to you too. So start sending those in, because I really want to start working through them and getting to the good ones as soon as we can. For you, Jacinta, we just heard the importance of space as this new domain layer. I think in some ways it might be the most important domain layer, because this is where we're going to centralize a lot of that sensed data in order to distribute it where it needs to be. Talk to us a little bit about that, about this emerging node of space. Where is NATO well positioned? Where is NATO not well positioned to take advantage of that new domain?
Yeah, thank you. Look, welcome everyone, and lovely to be here. I will just quickly address the elephant in the room. Why is an Australian sitting here talking about MDO in NATO? And why is a middle power that doesn't have a string of satellites talking about space? And two things. The second one first, Philip talked about MDO being the solution for smaller powers, for middle powers. Space is something that we can all access. Space is something, and our cyber nodes as well, are things that are accessible to every country, to every organisation, and we're working very, very closely in partnership with the commercial sector to really nut out what is it we really need to do in the military. What do we really need to do from governments, and what don't we need to do because they're providing it? On the NATO piece as well, Australia is a NATO partner. We are an enhanced partner, enhanced opportunity partner. We have contributed over $1 billion Australian dollars, not so much as US dollars, but close, to support Ukraine. We have trainers. My colleagues are training and have been for some time as part of the UK-led training program. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because what's happening in Ukraine matters. My minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, has said that there is no such thing now as different strategic theatres. And this is where space comes in. He's also said there's no such thing as strategic warning time anymore. Conflict across the spectrum is happening right now. So, in terms of space for interoperability, what is NATO doing well? It's focusing on what is happening in Ukraine, it's analysing it, it's understanding, it's seeing how we can most effectively and efficiently support the Ukrainians to do what they must do in their fight on the ground, and then what we can do back, further back from the theatre. Very crucially for space, we've heard throughout the past couple of days a lot about platforms. We still think in terms of platforms, we still think in terms of single services. We've heard about tanks, we've heard about autonomous systems, drones, if you like, missiles, air missile defence. When we moved, and it's very recently that we have started the move to a domain-centric approach and multi-domain operations, for the first time, we have sat down and done our experimentation and wargaming and realised that none of that works at all without space, without the electromagnetic spectrum under control and secure, without secure communications, and very critically, part of the reason we, and many countries represented here, have established a space command or a space force, we have a space command, is because our entire civil society also relies upon this. Certainly, a few years ago, and NATO is doing all of these things as well, even just a few years ago, I would be sitting in planning with my colleagues, and we thought our war theatre, our conflict theatre was somewhere distant. We would deploy naval assets, maritime assets, air, land assets, and then we'd think about how do we actually speak to each other afterwards. We wouldn't think about who is going to be getting access to their online banking. How are we ensuring that our autonomous mining and agriculture in Australia is running? How do we know about our position, navigation and timing for our military capabilities? Now we have this right at the centre of everything that we do.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, and I'm glad you bring up this evolution from platform-centric warfighting to domain-centric warfighting and the war games. There's been a couple of different war games that have been really instrumental in helping the U.S. military focus on all domain command and control and multi-domain operations, because basically they found that if you're just relying on a fancy $90 million jet to go and win your contest with China, that's not going to work. That is a failing strategy. You have to be able to rely on that jet. We have to be able to rely on a ground unit. You have to be reliant on a sea unit, each of them to hit the right target and know the right target. And if one of them suddenly vanishes, you have to quickly move to find the best shooter for that target. And that's really what multi-domain operations is all about, turning all of that into a single transparency. And space, of course, very important to that. So let me turn to you, Dr. Xavier, because you represent Portugal here on the stage. And how does Portugal perceive itself in terms of being a security actor in the context of NATO? And how do you perceive this challenge of multi-domain operations?
Thank you, Patrick, for the question. I'm so honored to be here, so thank you. Portugal perceives itself as a bridge between the transatlantic, so between Europe, Africa, and Americas. We are founding members of NATO, so of course the transatlantic tie is very important for us, but we also perceive ourselves as having a foreign policy that is committed with all the values, goals, and objectives that NATO has, of course, and the EU, namely when we deploy our missions and operations. In 2024, we have more than 30 missions and operations, and very briefly, I would like to highlight that those missions and operations are spread almost all over the world, but again, mainly in Africa, Mediterranean, in the south. We have 2 missions of the United Nations in the Central African Republic and in Colombia. We have 12 missions of NATO in the Atlantic, Mediterranean, Baltic, Iraq, Lithuania, Romania, also in Belgium, Slovakia, and Kosovo. We have 8 missions, European Union missions, Mediterranean, Somalia, Central African Republic, Mozambique, where we lead the mission UTM Mozambique since the beginning, Gulf of Guinea, Ukraine, and Red Sea. And we have 10 bilateral or multilateral also missions in Gulf of Guinea, Jordan, Central African Republic, Lithuania, São Tomé, Guinea-Bissau, East Timor, Cape Verde, and Mediterranean.
It sounds like everybody in Portugal is somewhere else other than in Portugal right now.
We are everywhere, that's obvious. Everybody knows that Portuguese are everywhere, but also in what concerns missions and operations, I would easily say that Portugal punches above its weight, because we are usually perceived as a small country, 10 million, well, not that different as in Czech Republic, but a country that has, of course, a geography that it's very, very important, because we are in the southern entrance of Europe, and all the challenges that we face from the south, namely maritime insecurity, illegal migration flows, or even trafficking or terrorism, they do have a huge impact in all Europe, all over the world, and that's why the role of Portugal in committing with these missions and operations based in the rule of law, in human security, and all of that, that NATO and of course the EU also purchases, are so important for Portugal.
And you see with that wide variety of different missions how being able to move very quickly between domains is very important.
And multi-domain is there, of course.
So let me turn to you, Dennis, and also I think this is a good question for the general. Earlier in Alexander's presentation, he brought up something that I think is really important and perhaps really underappreciated, and that is that there's a certain discrepancy between Western NATO, big NATO, Germany, et cetera, and their embrace of multi-domain operations versus Eastern flank countries that are a little bit perhaps intimidated or haven't fully embraced it as a concept yet. How do you see this bifurcation in Europe, if you perceive it, between some nations that are putting in thematic work to create MDO doctrine and other nations that are very perhaps aggressive and towards the Russia threat, but haven't fully committed or aren't confidently embracing MDO yet? Do you see discrepancies across the alliance in terms of willingness and confidence to embrace MDO?
So first of all, I want to foot stamp the comments that were made by Phil at the beginning. I think MDO, or Joint All-Domain Operations, it's an evolutionary process. So this is a timely discussion on a timeless topic, I would say. So we will not see a perfect MDO setup, under a NATO umbrella or, in the nations or what have you, within the next decades, I would even argue. Why is that? Because of evolutionary processes on the technology side. I know MDO is much more. It's not only about technology, it's about policy, it's about cultural understanding and what have you, but technology drives a lot of, how do you deliver an effect at the end of the day. So to your question, I think it really depends. If we talk to countries, it really depends where they are in terms of modernizing their defense forces, right? So, for example, when a nation is buying the F-35, we are entering into discussions, and immediately there is this discussion on, oh, there is a lot of data, and there is a connectivity element to it. So let's sit down, discuss the threat environment for that nation, and then basically take it to the next level. So, what do we need to do in order to end up with kill chains? And I think that's really how you break down complexity. Instead of boiling the ocean and coming up with a holistic approach, we found that it's even better that you start with single kill chains and then try to connect systems. So, for example, what we do, and it's a big topic because stuff that's in the inventory needs to be connected to stuff that's coming in. 4th generation aircraft, 5th generation aircraft, how can we make that happen?
Yeah.
So, and we have solutions for that, and we already basically proved that this is possible, and then even connect that system with the ground forces. So connecting an F-35 with a 4th generation aircraft, and then launch the effect with a HIMARS. And that's all doable. And so this first question on the Baltics, I would say, I think it's already
It is, well, yeah,
so,
they can't see the question.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll get to them, but I promise.
Okay,
Yeah,
but I answered that question already now.
Yeah.
Because, they bought HIMARS, and in an ideal world, when we have a NATO operation, F-35 will be included, and you can use the F-35 basically to get targeting data down to that HIMARS system from a Baltic nation and then deliver the effect, okay? So that's a kill chain, and that's where actually MDO is coming to life.
Okay.
One more comment, sorry.
Yes.
So, and back to Australia, because that's a perfect example and the most advanced example for our company at the moment, where basically the Australian forces came up with the idea to, come up with a procurement program on the C2 side, where all the different services are joining and coming up with a solution to deliver effect across platforms, across sensors, and what have you. So the AR6500 and follow-on programs. So that's something we work with Australia, and it's very advanced.
Yeah.
And I stop here.
The question was, how can countries in the Baltic defense line contribute to the MDO? So
Exactly
that's
right.
exactly. So General Kreitz, your thoughts though on that central premise that's mentioned in the paper, that there are some NATO countries that are more confident in their MDO acquisition, in their concepts and plans, and other countries on the eastern flank that are less confident or need more encouragement to embrace MDO.
What you have to see is, number one, it's a top-down and a bottom-up approach at the same time, and you have to have that, because what was the examples were given, those are the use cases. You need to prove to the nations in niches already how it works. And this is that everybody understands a common approach to MDO. Top-down, as you said, there is the concept out there, there's the definition out there, and this is as important. And let me also touch on something, cognitive superiority. This is something in the future where really everybody involved has to have the full understanding what the advantage is, how you maintain the advantage, and how you train. It's not only that the military needs to get trained, also a whole of government approach to that, how to be resilient. So I would not say that I see nations that are not that confident. So everybody has understood, because right now where we are also playing a major part when it comes to common exercises, be it exercise in Portugal, REPMUS, where unmanned teaming systems are being, or civics in Poland. This is where the nations come in, this is where the companies come in, and this is where everybody can prove how you connect, and this is where you see that it works. And from there, at the end of the day, it's human beings and trust and confidence. Yeah. So it's a two-way approach. It just takes, and the point is, I always make the case, out of the 32 nations, I would say, we had this today. There are no small and no big nations. They're all nations with different capabilities. You just have to approach them, and you have to give all of them trust and confidence that what they do will be important and will be incorporated in MDO.
I think that's a really great setup for Jacinta, because one of the other things that Australia is demonstrating and really showing in terms of punching above its weight is participation in exercises. You guys are involved in so many exercises in so many places, and really important, even though we're in Europe, for common defense of the Pacific as well. So when you go out and you see these exercises that you're undertaking with partners and allies, and particularly in the Pacific, these allied exercises are growing to include just a wider number of nations that never before wanted to exercise with each other, and now they're really excited to, like they're raising their hand to, in the Philippines, to exercise with Indonesia and other places. It's really remarkable. When you talk to the countries participating in these exercises, what are they telling you in terms of the challenges of multi-domain operations and how easy they might be to overcome?
It's a great question, because it goes to, I suppose, the fear that these things are exquisite, expensive capabilities, that they are things that are only available to certain countries. We're an original Five Eyes partner, so our neighbours will look at us and say, well, you know, we can't have what you have, can we?
Yeah.
If you think that you want to be interoperable with your partners, if you write doctrine, you train for that, you exercise in that way, and you operate together in that way, you will break through all of these barriers. So our exercise program is one where we work with our partners to identify what is important for them. So our exercises typically will have an operational link. Illegal fishing, things like this, where we can actually do an exercise, but it has operational utility. It provides enhanced situational awareness. And very key to this discussion about multi-domain operations, it provides that connective tissue. If we want to do an operation, a maritime operation with Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia and the Philippines, which we have done, we came to the party to say we will help all of us communicate. Really basic. It's the most fundamental problem all of our militaries face, that we face with our emergency services, but we could do it. If you want to do it, then you must do it. But again, critically with exercises and operations, it always has to be something where there is a shared interest. If we just bring someone along to a training course, we bring someone along to an exercise, and it is not directly and temporally, so in time, relevant to what I'm doing in reality, it will not change anything. A quick point on what it is that we're talking about with multi-domain operations that's different. It is connective tissue. It's having all elements of your force and your nation, this is what our country aspires to, all elements working together. It's not just, and the report really focused on this, thank you, it's not just command and control. It's not just how do we get the joint pieces to manoeuvre together. We know how to do that. It's bringing it up to a consciousness that we are using everything that we have, and very importantly, the most efficient thing to deliver an effect, the most effective thing to deliver an effect, a partner to deliver the effect, if that's the most effective and efficient way. And to relate that to Ukraine, this is how you get the creative cognition, this is how you get ahead of an adversary that doesn't think in multi-domain operations, because that is how a country like Ukraine, without a Black Sea fleet, can destroy a Black Sea fleet.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think, and you bring up something that I think is also very underappreciated in multi-domain operations, and the need to build out that web, and that is by doing that, you're also helping build out a shared intelligence picture. That's at the basis of, it's not just maneuvering, it's not just moving the little guys on the board to where they need to be. It's building an intelligence picture that's going to enable you to better detect hybrid operations. So illegal fishing is something that happens and it's a criminal activity, but it's also something that China has weaponized as part of its hybrid warfare campaign in the Philippines and the China Sea. And Dr. Xavier, you point out this wide number of different missions that you're involved in, counterterrorism work in Africa. Obviously illegal fishing is a part of it. It's something that has become an aspect of great state warfare to basically weaponize criminality, but it's also its own threat. In terms of intelligence and surveillance needs, which is a huge part of this MDO discussion, what do you need right now, and where do you see new capabilities arising to help you meet those needs?
That's a very important issue, because in fact what we are all talking about is not only cooperation but interoperability. So, and multi-domain is about interoperability. And Portugal also perceives this multi-domain doctrine in terms of acknowledging that nowadays we cannot only look to the conventional part of conflicts, but also the unconventional part in an hybrid framework. So Portugal is of course committed to fulfill its capabilities. It's a fact that Portugal in this moment has not reached yet the 2% of the GDP. We are trying to do it until 2029. But I think that all the discussions that we had are very clear on one thing. It's not on what do you actually spend, but how do you spend it. So it's not about being a small or a big country. It's on about having the ability to have the right capabilities at the right timing, or as I heard before in another panel, on being fast or slow in achieving the goals and in aligning with your allies those capabilities. That's why also in Portugal we believe that defense is not expenditure, it's investment. And our 2026 military programming law will have its capabilities very well organizing. We bought 5 KC-390 military transport aircraft. We also have multi-purpose logistics ships, 6 ocean patrol vessels that we are going to receive in 2027, 3 support helicopters, Super Tucano aircraft, and we are also going to invest in the soldier combat system, the soldier of the future. So that's of course very important for us. In addition, and General already mentioned that, Portugal is very committed in the exercises, the one that really makes sense to be in NATO or also in the EU, to have this interoperability. So let me just emphasize this. We organize several exercises, Orion, REPMUS that you mentioned, Real Thaw, and we also participate in other exercises like CWIX, Steadfast Defender, and Cyber Coalition. So all of those exercises aim to have that interoperability, and that's why also the questions of intelligence and surveillance are so important, because they only make sense if you are partnering with others and if you are really sharing your capabilities and sharing your ability to also partner and work with the others.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's also just all of this robust exercising among partners and allies. I think it's also a great cause to be very optimistic about the West in general, because we're going to spend a lot of time here at this conference. It's our job to focus on the doom and gloom and rub gravel in our hair at the threat of China and Russia. Russia's exercising with Venezuela and Syria, and that's not a fantastic group of exercise partners. We have an entire alliance here that is pushing each other based on shared values to exercise more robustly. And Dennis, I wonder if you could comment a little bit on that. When you look across all of the exercises that Lockheed is participating in, when people come to you and they say, how can interoperability between our countries be improved? What can you tell them?
So I think this goes back to the comment I made earlier. I think what you need to do is really have the people in the room and start that dialogue. And then over time, with the expertise that the countries are bringing in, information they are sharing. We have expertise that we are bringing to the table, obviously, and we build up that expertise based on discussions we are having, on scenarios we are having. And then in discussing these OA scenarios and basically coming to solutions, again, kill chains at the end of the day, that's helpful for us, but we also see that it's very, very helpful for the countries we are talking with, because we are also sharing insights.
Yeah. Let's turn to some of these Slido questions. We have a number of them. We could use more, so please keep sending them. The first one, what's currently the biggest obstacle to accomplish MDO implementation within NATO and its partners at this point? So Dennis, you talked a little bit about the need to start the conversation, get people in the room, get them comfortable. But in terms of, I think this is a good question for you, General, as well. What is the biggest obstacle to accomplish MDO implementation within NATO right now?
I would say from what we see right now, it's digital transformation and the digital backbone. That nations, and the innovation cycles and the speed you need to have on one hand, really getting into those systems, being able to connect and being able to share at the same time. And from there, it's getting much easier, but this is something where everybody needs to agree on. And nothing is easy, especially when it comes also to the defense industry and everybody who provides that, because as we all know, even though it's digitalized, you still have to have a certain kind of interoperability, and you have to have a data protocol where everything works on. So there are still some obstacles to overcome. But again, coming back to exercises.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the use cases, if you don't show what it is, if you don't make those things understandable, and this is where industry, and let me state that absolutely clearly, okay, there will be no leading role for a European or NATO military if you don't have a compatible, highly capable defense industry with that. There is no doubt about it. And this is where on exercises now we understand, we share, because I would say the military is the side, they ask the smart questions, and on the other side, then it's the industry who answers and provides then solutions to it.
Okay, I want to stick with that for a second, because when I talk to folks about some of the big challenges, particularly you just mentioned sharing and intelligence sharing and data sharing. Amazon right now can create you a digital backbone if what you want to do is drop shipping. Like kids are now creating multi-million-dollar businesses because Amazon can create a digital backbone to connect you to your supply chain, connect you to your supplier, connect you to your customer. When I talk to people in the US about one of the big problems with sharing, they mention policy. There's still too much concern, too much inhibition around declassifying stuff in time to make it relevant. Ukraine provides a great example of how fast you can do it, but they're still lagging in terms of declassifying stuff in time for Ukraine. If you ask the Ukrainians, they'll tell you that they should be declassifying stuff far faster. So within NATO, what is that conversation like? The policy barriers, the kind of reflex around stamping classified or no foreign on pieces of intelligence and slowing down that data flow. Is NATO having a productive conversation about it, do you think?
Yes, we do. We see it daily, and this is a real cultural aspect. It's a culture. Everybody likes to overclassify. Before you do something, you rather say, oh, it's secret. No, it isn't. And what I would say is, and now it comes back to artificial intelligence, data lakes, and all those things in itself and speed is security in itself, because you have so much data. If you don't have the right tool to it, the data in itself doesn't help you anymore. At the same time, there was this question, well, how do you ensure that the data is secure, that it's safe? Well, you have so many tools where you can see that and analyze that in doing that. But this all needs to come together. But first and foremost, there are processes, there is data out there, but there are human beings out there. And this is what we have to really tackle, that we have a culture change in there.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think you all should just declassify more things, but I'm a journalist, so you shouldn't necessarily take my point of view on that, because that's always my perspective. Let's go to another question. In the framework of military cooperation, how to ensure shared data can be trusted? I think this is a very good point. It gets back to what you were talking about. And here I think, talking to folks in the intelligence community, you also see a use case for artificial intelligence, because that can go through the data and potentially find things that should definitely be released, should not, and even promise a window for how long something should be released or kept secret before that expiration should expire. What do you think?
first of all, there are no problems, there are only solutions out there. And this is how we need to approach that, especially if you talk to the folks from the intelligence community. Well, everything is secret, but it's not anymore. So again, this is how we use all the new digital innovations, if you will, in order really to tackle that and come forward, and it's a top-down approach. Yeah. So if you leave everything to your mid-level management, of course, they are kind of restricted in what they do. It starts at the highest level, and you have to come down and you have to lead by example.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you will not change that.
I just want to comment on it, and obviously it's a policy discussion, but the funny story is that there are also technical solutions to overcome sometimes these policy issues, because you can collect a classified data stream, but the information that you need in order to deliver something, you can extract that out, and it's a declassified information piece that you actually need. So we are also working on solutions where we basically get the data in and then basically work the piece that's really releasable and then get that in real time through, machine learning tools, AI and what have you, to the point where to the receiving end at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So there are also technical solutions to policy questions.
Yeah, but I think to General Chris's point, there's still often, very much of the time, a person that's in charge of implementing that and taking that risk, and you have to create an environment where it's okay for people to begin to take those risks, and there's some incentive. Here's another one. With new domains emerging, how do you approach benchmarking? For example, what are the benchmarks for information operations within the MDO? I guess by benchmarking, I'm not sure, perhaps that means what's a fantastic example of an MDO exercise or operation that really showed, okay, this is the end state we want to get to. This is what it really looks like when it's successful. Any thoughts?
I give you a very classic, maybe easier example to that. In the old days, even in the joint world, sometimes, if it was a land target, it was then a day attack by land. And if it was air, still calling it a joint operation. Why? Because you had some information, you shared the information, but you still did that. So nowadays, if you think just within the 5 military domains we are having, and that's what I always say, where you have the information dominance, once you're using space and cyber at once, you aggregate those information, and then at the end of the day, it's who can create the effect. And this is the point. I don't care. I'm capability agnostic. All we care from defense planning aspects is the effect. And this is where MDO comes down to. If you just leave it within those military domains, at the end of the day, as long as the effect, and it doesn't matter if it's a land, a sea, or air capability that engages at the end of the day. But this is throughout the command and control levels and the levels of decision where you take. This is where people need to understand. It comes back to culture, how to get there.
Yeah. So please go ahead, Jacinta.
Yeah, I was going to add to that one way of thinking about benchmarking, and it goes exactly from Chris's excellent example, and that is that your adversary is confused. Your adversary is challenged with where to look for the threat, and that the capability effect comes from a domain or a platform or a source that is completely unexpected. That's the brilliance of multi-domain operations.
Just one quick add-on to that. We're talking a lot deep precision strike. And deep precision strike, when you see nowadays, we're talking ranges. In former days, nobody would have thought about it. But the beauty, if I may say so, the beauty about it is you need to create a dilemma with your opponent, so he doesn't know, is it coming from the air domain, is it coming from the land domain, or from the sea domain? And this is where he gets in a dilemma where maybe he even cannot defend, and then now I'm back in the deterrence business, so he thinks twice if he really wants to challenge someone.
Right, exactly.
This is how the mechanisms work.
Yeah. An F-35 does not deter an F-35, a ground unit, a sea unit, and you don't know which one is going to clobber you. That's a better better example of deterrence. And I think that leads very much to the next question, I think is a great one. How do we best accelerate digital transformation of the national defense ecosystems across NATO nations in a way that keeps interoperability top of mind? So General Chris, you spoke to this a little bit, but Isabella, as a nation that is trying to accelerate digital transformation on the national level, Portugal has a wonderful ecosystem for startups, and yet at the same time, startups and non-traditional defense companies often have a pretty hard time breaking into the military, even though they have some of these data fusion capabilities or AI talent that we're talking about. So how do you accelerate digital transformation of the national defense ecosystem in Portugal? And then maybe we'll broaden it out across NATO.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, because yes, Portugal is very well known for being so attractive in terms of startups, but structurally what we have is small and medium enterprises a lot, and those small and medium enterprises, SMEs, we are trying them to be as competitive as we can, especially when they apply for funds, both in the EU and NATO level, which is very important. But yes, indeed, when we look to the Portuguese defense industrial sector, that includes over 300 companies and 61 research, development, education, and training entities, covering 40 different areas of activity and 21 clusters, including aeronautics, shipbuilding and repair, technical textiles, automation of robotics, software engineering and development, cybersecurity, energy, advanced materials, autonomous systems, and space. So the 5 domains and multi-domain. How do we best accelerate digital transformation? I would say that very briefly, I think that we could cover 6 aspects that we could also sum up based on this discussion. First of all, we have to reduce fragmentation and increase the cooperation. There are a lot of complaints about bureaucracy, duplication, so reducing fragmentation is vital to actually accelerate this transformation. Then we should all invest more in defense, in joint capability development projects, and I think NATO is very important on that, on empowering and boosting these opportunities for the allies. We should also reinforce the lessons learned procedures, and that's why also the exercises are so important, but they are important if we have the lessons learned. Lessons learned means implementing new methodology, new exercises, so lessons learned, I think it's very important. Invest in logistics and strengthen supply chains, increase joint training exercises, and at last, improve secure communications among allies. It could be a roadmap to actually get where we are, but I also think that at the end of the day, there are always triggers that accelerate much more all these almost academic discussions that we have. And Ukraine was, in the recent months, the best trigger, I think, that can make us all cooperate and think, how can we actually foster this kind of opportunities?
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the point you were making earlier about the need to invest in things that aren't necessarily part of the defense infrastructure of a country that, narrowly fits in that 2% thing. Supply chain, et cetera, all of those things are broader, and they are the important backbone to digital transformation of militaries. So we have about 2 minutes left. There's still plenty of CITO questions, but we also have carbon-based life forms here, which I love. I love when carbon-based life forms show up in real time to watch a panel. Anybody with a question, like live, want to raise their hand, or are we shy? Carbon-based life forms, are we now to? Oh, we got one. Yes, please. We'll get you a mic because we're trying to, capture this for digital posterity. Well, yes, but we also want to get you. There we go. Gotcha.
So I wanted to ask specifically about the Baltic states and about the Baltic states. How can they improve their readiness in terms of the MDO? I understand that the first concept of the MDO was very much out there with the thought of the Baltic states scenario being under threat, and when you talk to these militaries these days, they do feel a little bit intimidated by the concept. They are very small resource. Estonia, for example, is only a reserve force. So how these small militaries can get adapted to the MDO needs?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Well, in simple terms, they are adopted. Okay. If you see the systems they have, the integration that happened, the systems they are buying, the integration that happened, it's already built in.
Yeah.
This is really what the future concept is about MDO. It doesn't matter if they buy a short-range air defense unit, as long as they are within standard, which it is, this is what NATO is there for, and this is what they are doing. They are part within the RC2 system when it comes to defense, and they are already there. And let me give you another point on the Baltic states when it comes to digital transformation. Where are the leading states in Europe when it comes to digital? Look to the Baltic states. Here you are. And let me make that point as well when it comes to stay in your lane and in your competencies. Digital transformation is nothing military owns. Digital transformation is something the nations own. Look at the healthcare system, look at the banking system. A big bank will tell you within 24 hours, if they are offline, most of the big banks, they are bankrupt because if their business is gone. So there are so many security needs where when it comes to digital transformation and all those aspects, those nations, they contribute so much overall to the whole of society approach. So I wouldn't be, they are not worried. I mean, I'm in constant contact and discussions with them. They're doing great. We, as NATO, and the bigger nations within NATO, they need to ensure that there's the trust and confidence that those smaller nations, of course, they are fully incorporated.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great note to end on, and I think that now we have a really good understanding of some of the MDO challenges, but also a roadmap for greater participation in building out MDO across the alliance and all the different ways it's going to contribute to not just better operations, but really better understanding of the threat environment across domains, across different facets of hybrid warfare. So real quick note, don't go anywhere. We will be right back for the next session, Beyond the Headlines, Reality on the Ground in Ukraine. But in the meantime, please join me in thanking our panel. I appreciate you guys so much. Yeah.